We're visiting with Gary Runyon today, and Gary's going to give us a quick tour of his shop.
Welcome.
Thank you.
This is sharpening station, sink, storage space. Works out very well for storing things. The sink really is a good feature of a shop because it seems like without it you're always running in and out. So I was quite pleased to get this.
And what material is this? Lexan?
It's a lab top, so it's an epoxy mineral filled top, and this was a section from work that didn't match anything, and they let me take it home, and it just happened to fit perfectly into this corner with where the plumbing just felt perfect.
Sure did, didn't it? Great. Okay.
Sometimes you get lucky. This is where I do most of my sharpening. I use mainly water stones. The system I use is essentially consists of a rubber covered plate that traps the water, and then I use a stone holder which will not move at all when you're sharpening, and I predominantly use water stones. So I've got some that you have to soak all the time. Most of these are the coarse stones, and then from the coarse stones I move to the Sharpening glass line series of water stones. So you don't have to soak these, but you just have to put a little water on them. And I walk through a series of sharpening stones. The finest one is a 30,000. It's a very expensive stone, but it leaves a mirror finish on the blade. Really makes it excellent for Japanese stuff or pane planes. Generally, just for sharpening a chisel real quick, if I want to touch it up, I use these Belgian honing stones. It's got about a 4,000 grit on the back side and an 8,000 grit on the other. It's actually a natural stone, comes this way. Works very well. And then all of them I pretty much keep flat with a diamond covered glass line lapping plate, so it's all very precise. It's an expensive system, but you get really good results with hand planes and chisels. For knife making and general sharpening, I actually use this. It's a piece of MDF that I've got a heavy piece of carbide in it, so it really doesn't move around, and a piece of rubber floor matting to hold it. And then I have these diamond plates that are used for carbide cutting, but they are worn for carbide, but they work very well for steel. And so I'll go from a 70 grit down to a 15 micron. And for knives, I usually, for kitchen knives and hand knives, things like that, I just use the diamond. I can establish a very good edge very quickly. Use just a little water. I've been using those plates for 25 years, and I can't tell if they've worn at all. So works very, very well for me. In my system, may be a little bit of an overkill for a lot of people, but I get very good results, especially with the hand planes. And a lot of the pieces that I do, I sort of like a hand plane surface rather than a sanded surface. So, anyway, works for me. And having a sink here is really convenient. However, if you don't have a sink, what I used to use is actually one of these little garden sprayers. And you can pump it up and have a bucket by, and you can clean everything up essentially with it. And so if you don't have a sink, I'd recommend, if you use water stones, so go get one of those, and it'll work very well. So. And then workbench.
It looks like you're making some knives here.
Yeah, I do a lot of metalworking and woodworking, so this is the sort of the bench that I'm at most of the time, doing anything fine, file work, and anything that I require a pretty good light and a good workbench. So you can see I've got a scattering of hand tools all the way around it, so I don't have to go far.
This is a neat little router base. Did you make that?
I did. Back 15, 20 years ago, I had to do some inlaying, and I didn't have an easy way to do it, but I did have a flexible shaft, and so essentially I machined it out of aluminum stock. These are shoulder bolts that you can buy, and the collar you can buy, and essentially it just locks in, and you put your bit in. You can adjust the collar to go down to the depth you want and then lock it. It's actually got a handle out here that's missing, but anyway, it works very well. It's been the aluminum I anodized afterwards, so it's got a very slick, hard finish, so it slides well. And then the base is machined to take router bushing that'll lock in there just like it'll fit my standard routers, and so I can use it for guiding the bit if I need to. And then you can get all kinds of end mills and ball mills and things like that, or veiners to inlay anything that you want. And it's easily controlled, variable speed. It'll do about 15,000 RPM, and very small and precise, and it allows you to be able to do some intricate work if you do that type of work. Here you're in sort of an L-shaped woodworking, metalworking area. I've got a Paragon digitally controlled, atmosphere controlled heat treating oven, and a thickness planer behind it, and a scroll saw. And then as you round the corner, I have some metal shears and a small Delta drill press, and then a Veritas Lee Valley rubber table. So as you walk past that, on the other side of the L, these are all knife making equipment. They work for woodworking, just about anything really. The belt sanders, two standard knife making belt sanders, and a digitally controlled disc sander. And I end up using them every bit as much for woodworking and for sharpening. They work great for sharpening lawnmower blades. This is a knife making belt sander. It's made by KMG, variable speed. They're pretty versatile because you can set them up to do a number of things. Always helps to turn it the correct way. It's got a tracking device, so you can track it off one way or the other if you're wanting to grind into a corner. This is running slow. It'll run very fast. You can put a coarse belt on these things and run it wide open and just feed metal into it. It's amazing how much metal will take off if that's what you want to do. But with the variable speed, I can slow it down and I get much better control for more precise things. It's easy to switch the belt. So I can put another grit belt. I can get belts from 30 grit to 6 microns. So you can literally polish on this thing. And it's got a number of different platens to use. You know, you got one locking device, and you can go from flat grinding to this device, and this will rotate any number of different ways. This is mainly designed for doing a convex bevel on knives, so you can do it. It's sort of like slack belt grinding, but with more support. And this rotates, so it runs with the belt, so there's less heat built up. Or you can switch to just a rubber wheel. And rubber wheels come in different densities. Some are serrated for taking off more metal. Some are smooth like this one, so you can get a better finish. And it's as easy as just locking it down, putting the belt on, tensioning the belt, and you're ready to go. If you want, you can bolt a tool rest onto the bottom of it. And it works for anything. I mean, you know, I use it just about as much for woodworking as I do for metalworking. This is essentially the same thing as what you saw before, except different model. This is a square wheel, I call it. This is the first belt sander I ever bought. Works very well. I've used it for 15, 20 years. You can use it with or without the tool rest, or you can, just like the other one, switch. And on this one, it's got a platen, so you can roll it over and use about a 3-inch wheel. You can roll it and use a canvas bonded to the steel platform. There's a little bit less friction, or you can roll it like that and use a small wheel, or you can roll it over and use a slack wheel between the two. Again, variable speed. And then the other thing I use predominantly for knife making is this disc sander. It's variable speed, where the others are DC variable speed motors. This is actually a AC variable frequency drive. So it's got much higher torque at low RPMs. I've got a tool rest that I've made myself. I can lock this in at very precise angles, so when I'm trying to do folding knives specifically, I can get very precise fits at the angle that I need. And then from there, I work over to my woodworking lathe. This is the wood turning area, or at least the large part of it. This is a conover lathe. I bought the metal parts. I got the wood and put it together. I found some old turret lathe that was being scrapped and bought the legs and put it together in around 1990, and been using it ever since. Lathe tools up here, blacksmithing and hammer tools there in that rack.
And this is a really unique switch arrangement here. This your switch?
Yes, this is on a pivot, which is so you can turn it anywhere. You know, even if you're down here, you can turn it, and all you got to do is lean against it to turn it back off.
Very unique.
And works really well. Over the years, I've been fairly satisfied with it. Variable speed is really handy because you don't have to sit here and switch belts. I almost never switch them unless I go to a really big piece. I'll slow it down. But in general, this middle of the road speed does 95% of the work I do. I do a lot of spindle work and not a whole lot of bowl turning anymore. So variable speed, I speed it up for doing the actual cutting, and then I find that I get better results when I slow it down considerably when I'm sanding it. It doesn't burn the sandpaper as much, and I think it works more effectively. The other thing is I made this variable tool rest. One of the idiosyncrasies of the conover is that the standard tool rest doesn't go as close into the center as I would like it, and so this allows me to be able to position a small tool rest to get very close to what I want to do, and it'll go past center, so it works very well for that. A lot of the parts that I'm making are for spinning and weaving, so I do support spindles and drop spindles, and which is what I use the red bud and the dogwood for, because they both turn exceptionally well. Seem very stable and seem to last a long time, so I prefer those, but I turn a lot of things in other words also. The speed ranges, I'm not really sure where this is running. Probably it's on the next to the last, so I think it probably runs as high as 1725 and probably goes down to maybe 500 or 600 at the low. Well, actually the low end is literally 1 RPM, you know, every 10 seconds, so you can slow it down so it's just barely turning. So because of the variable speed, I don't have to change the pulleys, the belt onto the step pulleys near as much, which can be pretty aggravating. And like I was saying before, I only change it when I'm doing a big bowl, and then I have to slow it down because it's only a 1-horse motor and it won't drive it at the higher speed, so I slow it down so that I have enough power to turn, and also the fact that, you know, the lathe is not stable when it's turning a great big piece at high RPM.
DC
This is a DC motor. It's one of the Jordan speed controls. I actually was putting those together for Dave Barbie and John Jordan for a while. I think I purchased this one when they first started out, and then most of the other machines are controllers that I either bought rebuilt controllers, or I built the controllers myself, bought the controller board and put them in the enclosures myself. This is my grinding station. It's a slow speed grinder. I've got a one-way Wolverine sharpening system on one side and a Veritas on the other, so I use this mainly for wood turning tools and this for hand planes and chisels and things like that. Bottles and oxygen for glass making, propane oxygen torch, it's just sort of stuck in the corner. And then lots of odds and ends. Pipe clamps, lots of scrap metal. One little trick I'll tell people about is if you wait until the election and you find all these signs that are sitting out laying around, if you get the ones that just make a sort of a rectangle with the sleeve over it, you can get all this very usable 3/16 metal for free. And I use them for making hooks to hang things on all over the shop. Swinging around to the other part of the wall, I've got a buffing station here for mainly knife making, but I also use it for wood turning and putting on a nice wax finish. These are two shaving horses. One of them's going to my brother. It comes off of the Brian Boggs design, and so you can lower it down or raise it very easily for different thicknesses of work, and the seat slides back and forth. I still have to upholster that. So this is the start of the other corner of the shop. This is an Enco 9x36 metal lathe. I use it mainly for making metal parts for a spinning wheel that we make, but I use it for odds and ends all over the shop. And then behind it is a surface grinder that's been pulled apart, and I've been rebuilding it, and eventually it'll go back, and that's mainly a knife making project. Coming back to the middle of the shop, this is a powered wire brush. I use mainly for taking rust and scale off of tools. A little bit dangerous, you gotta watch what you're doing, but works very well for the blacksmithing and for just, you know, if you get a piece of steel that's rusted, you can take it off real quick and then coat it with an anti-rust. This is my milling machine, designed for metal work, but works for both metal and wood. I use it a lot for cutting out the throats on hand planes because you can get a very precise cut, very controlled cut, and then you just clean the corners up and you're pretty well done. I use it for doing some woodworking parts. It's almost like a pin router for the spinning wheels, and then just any general metalworking. It's one of these tools that once you get it, you just find more and more ways you can use it. So,
Gary, I see that you've got a lot of industrial equipment here, like this Bridgeport. How do you come about this kind of equipment?
You just put feelers out, you look around, let people know you're looking for them, or you look in the want ads. I bought that back in the early 90s, and one of the machinists at work found it, and I was able to purchase it at a very reasonable price, and I rebuilt the front part of it with his help, and been using it ever since. You know, the metal lathe was just another deal. Somebody passed away and their father had it, and I was able to pick it up for about half of the rate. The knife making pieces, you almost never find them new. So as part of the knife making side, I generate enough money from that I try and buy one piece of equipment every year. So what you see here is number of years of taking the profit from the knife making side and putting it into buying tools. Well, here's the roll around cart that I have for all of my clamps. One of the wood turners up in Nashville found a bunch of these for $5 a piece. I bought one and reinforced it, and eventually it became a cart to carry most of my clamps, not all of them, but a good portion, and it's got wings on it, so I can put clamps on both sides and then put the long ones in the middle and hang T-squares and other things off on the side. I keep these type of clamps mainly for things going on either the bandsaw or the drill press, and they're very handy, adjustable. I've got 3 or 4 of those. But when you're not using it, you just sort of move it out of the way, and when you're in a big project, you need them, you can roll it over so it's close so you're not walking all over the place. I occasionally repair old spinning wheels when I don't have an opportunity to dodge the friend asking for it. This is from Ken Caulfield. It's actually a treadle wheel that you can use spin off of each hand, so it's more productive. And I'm basically turned a leg for it, which is complete. And now I'm in the process of trying to stain it to match before I glue it in. And then we also make a spinning wheel. And these are just parts of it. This would be the upright, and it's got a platform that comes down, and then the wheels comes off of these the spindles that'll come out of these holes, all out of hard rock maple. The Workbench was the second piece of furniture I ever built. When I was in graduate school, I had a chance to get into the architecture department and take a night class, and so this was a project I wanted to do. It's made entirely out of beech except for the runners, which are oak. And I bought the screws and made the sliding parts myself. And I've been using it pretty hard since 1980, 1981. And it's really almost a necessary thing if you do a whole lot of woodworking, especially handwork.
I see some really unique planes here. I don't think I have ever seen one of those. What is this one?
Well, this is a Japanese style hand plane, so it actually operates by full stroke. And I've got it set for a very fine shaving, so you can see it's not pulling much off. It's just little teeny things.
It's all the same one?
Yep, same one, little finger plane. I use it to very quickly take the edge off of corners or thin things you can plane. Pretty much keep it out all the time. Japanese bevel plane, so it'll cut a 45-degree bevel. And you can set the depth so it'll do the same one every time.
Very good.
Yeah, some nice handwork in it. I mean, they fitted, it's essentially a miniature plane that's set in this holder.
Oh, okay.
And
Did you build that?
I did not, no, I purchased this. But works very well. I use Japanese planes, Western style planes, spoke shave that I made that works very well. And I make a lot of my own hand planes. I just enjoy making tools.
I guess this block right here will be a plane one day.
That'll be 2 shoulder planes. It's made out of ebony mesquite. It's got a density, I don't know, probably 1.1, 1.2. I don't think it'll float in water. Mm-hmm. Never worked this before, but it should be interesting. I make a lot of hand tools. I'm probably more of a tool maker than a woodworker in a lot of cases. But anyway, this is the first hand plane I made. Blade was out of a planer blade, high-speed steel. I used it so much that I wore the throat out of it, so I put some lignum vitae in there and made it adjustable and still use it and works fine. Next one was a scrub plane, again a planer blade. I think this was hard rock maple and teak, and when you need a scrub plane, it's pretty handy. And lately I've been making planes like this. Tool steel blade 01, hardened myself, and I play around with the different angles of the bed to make them more optimized for different woods. So Some of them I have are low angle that work fine for straight grain woods, and then I also have some that are higher angle for curly woods. Smoke shapes. This was a kit from Veritas. It basically comes with the brass plate and the blade and these adjusting screws, and it has a sort of a template that you can cut out. When I put this together, it was worked fine, but I didn't like how high the screws stood up, so I ended up actually laminating a piece of mesquite to make the body thicker, and it actually makes it look very pretty, and it's a little more functional, and a very good tool. You can push it for doing legs and spindles and things, or pull it. It works in either way. And then I tend to set the blade up so it cuts a thin shaving on one side and a thick shaving at the other. And then one of the other tools I make is this little bow saw. It comes as a kit from Gramercy Tools. It has 4 different blades, very thin, with different number of teeth per inch. And essentially what you buy is the 4 blades and this brass locking thing. And then everything else you basically just shape from wood. So this is done with hickory for the bows, and pigeon wood for the handles, and redbud for the locking device. And so essentially you can just tighten it up with this little toggle, and then the blade you can switch. It'll move around for whatever angle, or if you're trying to cut curves. And because you have an 1/8 inch blade, you can tension it very well, and it cuts really well. And the kit, I think, is like less than $30, so it makes a very nice project for a very usable tool. Well, here is sort of the woodworking island. I've got an 8-inch Delta joiner, real robust machine I used a lot. Got a roll around cart for picking up scrap pieces of wood that I don't want to throw away, and as you can see, it's brimming. You need several of them, I think, at the end of the day, or you need to do a whole lot more wood burning or something, because I seem to generate more than the capacity to store it. So, all of this is hooked up to a 55-gallon vacuum system. Works okay, and I always switch from machine to machine, so I've always got a vacuum on it. Controls the dust a little bit, helps my lungs. A central vac would be a whole lot better, but this has been adequate for 20 years or so until I can upgrade.
I see you have a dust collector built in your guard over your table saw too. That's really unique.
I do. It's a 4-inch system. It actually doesn't work very well with the vacuum I have, because my vacuum system's not powerful enough, but it acts as a guard, and I use it as required, and does control the dust somewhat. So the guard system, more than anything, is what I was looking for. This is my table saw. It's a Powermatic 66. Like a lot of the equipment in here, I bought it used. I've got a rotor hanging off of the wing. I use this Excalibur as a blade guard, and the other thing I found really handy is Veritas sells this splitter kit. And so I have 2 different thicknesses for controlling kickback, and you can get one for a thin kerf, one for a regular kerf. And it pops out, and it's, if you rotate it, it's different thicknesses against it, so you can set it up so it's literally pushing the piece of wood against the fence, so you really don't have to hold it as much. And it's a little finicky just to get everything set and positioned correctly, but once you do, it's I use it all the time. The only time you can't use it is when you're doing something that's lower than this and you're running it through, not cross-cutting, but cutting the groove or something. So I really recommend it for retrofitting an older saw. I've got a paddle on-off switch here. I can turn it on with my finger and then easily turn it off by just hitting it with any part of my body, and it'll immediately turn it off. takes a lot of the worry about having something going wrong and not being able to turn the machine off quick, and very convenient and not hard to make. Essentially, it's just a hinge and a piece of plywood, and the way they have these magnetic switches, all you have to do is have a piece of wood that'll push against it, and so it's probably an hour job. So this is a router table. You can use the fence from the table saw as a guide. Works pretty well for cutting grooves and rounding, putting bevels and profiles on. I use the router table for a lot of other things, more precise things. Sometimes it's easier to set it up on the router table than it is this one. 14-inch Delta bandsaw I purchased used. Went ahead and put a riser block on it. It's got a DC 2-horse variable speed, so I can speed it up for woodworking or slow it down for doing metal work. Works better for woodworking than it does for metal work, let's put it that way. But variable speed is a nice thing to have. This is a little tag miniature lathe that I use for very small metalworking projects, for knife making, and I turn a lot of pens, and I used to use it for demonstrating because you could pick it up and carry it easily and set it up in about half a minute. I used to turn bowls. It's got 4-jaw, 3-jaw chucks, and it's actually a very versatile machine and very stable for as small as it is. This aluminum extrusion is filled with concrete, and then they put a hardened dovetail for the ways, and so it's very vibration free. Will do very precise metalworking, which is what I need for it, and it's variable speed also, so I can control the speed however fast, so you can speed it up for turning and then slow it down when you're sanding. And then this is a big Rockwell drill press. I don't have occasion to use it very often, but when you need it, it's really handy. I bought it used for a song. It's loud and very powerful, but you know, 5 times a year I'll need it, and I'll crank it up, and it does what it's supposed to do, and it's got a small footprint, so it doesn't take up a huge amount of space. This is the back garage where I store almost anything that I don't want in the front garage. So I've got all my cabinet wood, mostly cherry, quite a bit of figured bird's eye and curly maple up here, along with everything from apple down below. There's a whole stack of apple wood and other woods. This is all dogwood that I collected for spindle turning. These are all offcuts for mainly doing wood turning and that. Down below on the bottom is a stash of metal. Gets it out of my way, and usually when I come out here it only takes me an hour or two to find what I'm looking for.
Well, Gary, we sure have enjoyed the shop tour, and thank you for showing us all your equipment. I guess your shop is unique in the fact that it's a combination woodworking shop and metalworking shop. We haven't seen a shop like that before, and we really appreciate you showing us.
Well, thank you. I do about 50% of the time metalwork and 50 woodworking. What you find is once you get the capabilities for doing the metalwork, you find they're awful handy for woodworking too. So it makes life easier in some ways.
Great.
We'll be right back. Thank you.